we may all see this differently. So this is something I wanted to talk about for a while, and this is a deep subject, so I'm sure we're only going to scratch the surface of it. So
Mhm.
the reason why I want to talk about slavery, and there's so many different angles to touch on it. Um, I've had conversations with my wife, other friends, stuff like that about slavery, and one of the things I remember growing up, right, learning about slavery, some of the movies and things that we watched, and just the narrative is that I always wonder as I've grown up, is the narrative of slavery good for us as we're growing up? And I always wondered, I said, now that I have kids, I wonder, well, let me say this. I wonder as a child, if I were taught the narrative differently, would I look at things differently? You know what I'm saying? As a people, as black people. Now we're not one monolithic people. We all come from different places, you know what I'm saying, and different things like that. But the point is that is the narrative of slavery the way we've been doing it for a long time, the way we tell it, the way we teach children, does it just make children angry, or or have we been able to use it in a way that helps uplift us and helps us to kind of move in a different way? Are we telling it right, or should we possibly for the future think about doing it differently as far as the narrative? And um, the points I'm making is that, or the questions I'm bringing up, do we use it in, I would say, broader black society? Do we use slavery as a reason for every ill that we have? Is that something that you guys feel that, do we use it for everything, or do you find people use it for everything, or should we rightfully use it for every ill that we have? You know what I'm saying? These are just questions. You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
honestly, I think that that is a very complex. There's those are complex questions with complex answers. To
Right.
try and simplify it, we weren't all taught slavery in the same manner. And I think as someone who grew up in the 80s, you came up with me, we went to the same schools. Slavery was hardly even touched on. They didn't really get into the meat and potatoes of slavery. I didn't feel angry about slavery until I got older and learned about slavery. If you're talking about, from a grade school perspective, at least back then, they didn't really get into it very deeply. It was, to me, I felt like it was glossed over a little bit more, and it was taught more it was taught by white teachers in a more matter of fact, informational kind of way, sort of trying to, I guess, tone down or I hate to say dumb it down, but it taught in a way to minimize the
Right.
impact of it. So I think in order to not make white people look bad, but not to enrage black people. And they just didn't want to get into it. A lot of school administrations and teachers didn't want to get into that. When you're dealing with predominantly white school staff, they don't want to deal with it.
Well,
They
well,
don't
let
want
me
to deal
ask
with
you a
it.
question real quick. When you learned about, and I probably should ask the question slightly differently. So what I mean by learned, not just that's including school, but I also mean that, like, for instance, should we show our kids roots and um all these other stories? Should we continuously show them these things, or should we maybe tell it differently? Like, when we start to take in all these things, different movies and things like that. And I'm not saying we shouldn't see them. I guess my question is, when you took those things in as you're developing, did you find them to be helpful to you, or do you find them to make you angry? Did you have a problem processing? And should we do something different going forward?
I'll say that my answer is all of the above. I found it helpful because I felt like I learned something maybe that I didn't know. I also took it with a little bit of a grain of salt because some of those movies and things are over dramatized, and
Sure.
some of those things add historical quote unquote facts that never happened. But I also found myself very angry and bitter and disturbed, to is an understatement, to see and hear some of the things that we learned. But as far as talking to our children, I think that as parents, I think we have a responsibility to learn as much as we can and have conversations with them. I think before we let them see these type of movies and things, so that we can help them process it in a healthy way. I don't think that we should use slavery as a excuse for all of societal ills. I think we need to understand it so we understand the generational impacts that it's had down the line. And I think that we should understand it in a way so that we're able to counteract some of those effects, and that so that we can make different decisions, and so that we can take that information to help change and shape our future. But I think that if we start using anything, let alone slavery, as an excuse, then that's an excuse to stay complacent. That's an excuse to stay, quote unquote, in your place, to never make progress, and to always say, well, I can't get ahead because my ancestors were enslaved. I can't get a job. I can't do this. I can't do that. I think people were using that as an excuse for laziness for a long time. Well, I'll never be able to get a job, so there's no point in me even going to college. There's no point in me even doing this or doing that because the man won't let me. I just don't think that we're doing ourselves any favors by using slavery as an excuse not to prosper and not to do right.
Okay. What y'all think?
I
Definitely.
think
Go ahead. Ladies first. Ladies first. Go ahead.
I just think that history is important. For me, when I was younger, I was I didn't know a lot as far as slavery, but what I did learn, it did get me angry. I remember having an experience on the train as a teenager where me and my a friend and I we were coming from school. I will never forget this. And we were talking, and you know how kids are, like real goofy, loud, playful. We were just kids. And we were talking, we were loud on the train. And there was a guy that was next to us, and he said, Black people are so ignorant. And he was white. I'll never forget it. And my friend, she was drinking soda at the time. And we looked at each other, and she took the soda and hit him upside the head with the soda, and we had a huge
That is
fight
that is
on.
so New York. That is
Yes,
so
we
New
had a
York right there.
huge fight on the train. Yeah, we were in high school, but I think that history is important, and I believe that everyone should learn about history and how it's affected people and things like that. So it's very important.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's honest. What you think,
All
Zell?
right. So I was born in 74, right?
Hmm.
So my parents, I'm the youngest of seven, right? So I have a sibling. So I'm doing this just to give you guys like a view of where I come from, right?
Hmm.
So I'm a 70s baby. I'm the youngest of seven. I have my most senior sibling is 18 years my senior, right? So I got an 18-year-old sister and I'm born, right? So I got all these siblings, all this perspective, right? Plus my parents were born in the 1930s, right? So I had the privilege of hearing their stories coming up in the South. My mom was born in Georgia. My dad was born in Arkansas. They left the South for opportunities and came to Chicago, right? So I had the privilege of hearing their stories, hearing where they came from, how they grew up. My dad said he had to leave home at 17 because he lived in a community where our family were sharecroppers. He said he could only go to school
Mm,
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday,
mm,
Friday, Saturday, he was working in the fields.
Hmm.
So he was like, that felt like slavery to him. He said, when I went back to school on Monday, I missed the lessons because I'm like, what y'all learned Thursday, Friday? Because I missed school because I had to work in the field. So he said he
Hmm.
had to leave. So slavery existed for approximately 400 years in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it ended on paper didn't mean that the societal impact of slavery and the way that
Mm-hmm.
they did things ended upon the ending of slavery in
Right.
1863, because it did not.
Mm-hmm.
It
Right.
continued, right? So then you go to policies that transition at the end of slavery. So, okay, we can't use slave codes anymore. We'll have these black codes or
Right.
Jim Crow laws, right? That
Right.
come into effect that would prevent this group of people in particular. These laws, these are laws
Mm-hmm.
on the books for this group
Mm-hmm.
of people to
Yep.
marginalize them, to
Right.
hinder their success. Now,
Right.
can some people succeed in spite of? Yeah, they can. But
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
that's like a fish swimming upstream. The
Right.
stream's going this way, the fish is going this way. Can they get up there? Yeah, but against all odds, right? It can happen. Should you use it as an excuse? No, but is it a fact? Yes, it is a fact
Right.
that black people are held down, that that redlining. You learn that in real estate, right? They don't teach that in
Oh
school,
yeah.
right?
I you learned that even before real estate. Yeah, for
You learn,
sure.
Mm-hmm.
right? So they heavily
Right.
talk about it in real estate because you
Mm-hmm.
have areas in which they don't want to lend money because it's a black
Right.
area, or if they lend
Yeah.
money, it's at higher interest rates.
Sure.
So your white counterpart can borrow money and pay a lower interest rate because he's in a white area. He or she is in a white
Right.
area. But if you're in a black area, your interest rate is high because they're like, we don't really want to lend money in that area, right?
Well,
So
Mhm.
even to your point, how they even developed the suburbs. I mean, the whole way that the suburbs were developed. I mean, that's a whole nother thing. But I don't
that's
want to
a
cut
whole
you off.
nother thing, right?
Yeah.
So and there's white flight as well, right?
Right. Yeah.
So there are things that are true. Like there is a lot of truth to what happens. Can we all
Yeah.
use it as an excuse? No. Should slavery be, taught? Yes. You should understand because you're like, how do we get here? Right?
Right.
So how do we get to this point? Well, it's because of these previous things that have occurred that have led us to where we are today, which
Right.
is, you know, the wealth gap between white America, black America is a chasm, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
there's a lot of reasons why. There's no silver bullet. There's no one reason why. It's a
Yeah.
lot of reasons as to why there is this gap. Some of it is real estate, some of it is wealth being passed down, which we did not
Right.
have wealth that was passed down.
Right.
We
Mm-hmm.
got some debt. When grandma and them died, they left with some debt or maybe a little money in a jar, a can, while
That
white
about it.
folks die with sometimes wealth, like, old money, right?
Right.
So I learned, and not to continue to beat it up, but I did learn
Mm.
that, like find your most beautiful buildings in whatever city you're in, right? The most beautiful buildings, even if they're by water or if they're not by water, they're in the downtown area. A lot of those buildings are built upon land that's leased. So somebody purchased that land many, many years ago, and they
Right.
leased the land for someone to build that property on.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, the lease is like for 99 years because you can't move the building. So who's that
Yep.
money going to? A lot of that money is going to people that don't look like us. So
Right.
when we're out working, you got people that's chilling because they trust fund babies, because they got money coming from old money that they have. Not all of them, granted. No, you got poor white people, absolutely. But you
Of
got some
course.
white folks that got a lot of money, and is it fair? Absolutely not. Can we use it as an excuse? Absolutely not. Is there truth to how hard our struggle is? Absolutely. It is a
Absolutely.
true fact. Should
But
we
you know
learn
what? Here's the
slavery?
thing.
Yes, we should.
I think that's a
Yeah.
great point, and I think that that's always going to be something we're going to have to deal with. Um, there's a lot of so there was a video I watched earlier that made a particular point. Actually, I'll play just this short little piece because it's such a it's such a dynamic part when you start talking about reparations.
Why is it important that monetary reparations be made specifically to African Americans as opposed to a broader group, such as Black Americans, which would include Caribbean Americans, possibly African immigrants, or expanded to the broader umbrella of people of color, which includes other racial groups as well.
So we are focusing on the descendants of the individuals who were promised those 40-acre land grants and denied them. You know, these are folks who had the promise of the opportunity to build wealth and, importantly, to pass that wealth on to their children. This is not the case of the more recent immigrants. We know that for the most part, unless your family was part of the diplomatic corps, Black people from the Caribbean and from the continent were not in the United States in large numbers until the late 60s. They did not experience enslavement in this country. Their ancestors did not experience Jim Crow in this country. They did not experience nearly 100 years of racialized terror against their families in this country. Yes, it is indeed quite likely that many of these individuals have a case that can be made for reparations, but not to the United States government. But individuals who are from Antigua or from Jamaica would take their case for reparations to the UK. Our histories are not the same. There's a huge difference between being forced to come to this country in shackles versus coming voluntarily for the opportunities that you believe are will be available to you. Our research suggests very strongly that the more narrowly, the more specific these claims are, the more likely they are to be supported.
This is so interesting. The reason why I played that is that okay, so for myself, obviously, and my sister, obviously, our parents moved here or came here in the 70s. So we're
Mhm.
first generation, right? Although the slaves came, most of them came from the West Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, and so on. We wouldn't be here if our parents hadn't immigrated. And then with Zell, obviously, your parents have a further deep root in the south of the country, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then Fonda, as far as your lineage, is it deep rooted in the country
And
or
in the South, yeah.
in the south as well?
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why I wanted to play that is that so I think it's an interesting conversation. Now, me being first generation here, I do think that's important for the reparations conversation because when you do start to talk about reparations, you will have every person who is melanated lining up saying, yo, you know what I'm saying? And I'd be the first to say, like, I would never be one of those people lining. Now, my kids are born here, right? But
Right.
and I was born here, right? But I can't. I do think there's a specific lineup when it comes to reparations. But
Yeah.
the reason why I bring that up is that the experiences of Black people are all different. For reparations, it may be a more sliver, narrow group of people, and I think that part is important for reparations. But the slavery conversation does hit everybody. The transatlantic slave um, movement or transatlantic slave. I don't call it movement. The transatlantic slave
Trade.
disaster. Hit everybody in the Caribbean, in the Americas, or in America, United States, and obviously in Africa. But I guess my point is, I'm thinking now. I'm like, okay. That being said, we all do come from different places, but we all do have to reckon with the same things moving forward. And I think while, like Zell, all of us pointed on a lot of truths, things that affected us, how we see the world. And I think that I'm wondering, is there a way we can use it to empower us to, for one, come together a little bit more, and how let me say it like this. I think a lot of our generation, a lot of parts of our generation are angry, resentful, distrustful, and just feel like salty, rightfully so, about the way things are, our place in the world, how things kind of went. And psychologically, there is something as Black people where, as an adult, you do have to come to a point where you're like, you know what? however things are, it's not going to change in my lifetime, but I got to do the best with what I have and be as positive as I can and do what I can do within my journey on this earth. But going forward, how the youth see slavery, I'm always wondering. I wonder what would happen if you taught a young black child more than slavery, or didn't even touch on slavery deeply. And again, I'm not saying it. I know this is this is controversial because if you skip over a lot of it, they don't understand, for instance, how the wealth gaps and things like that happen. But my thought is that as you program children, we're all programmed. As children are programmed as they learn, the question is, do we feel like consistent victims? Is it something that ingrains a certain level of victimness in us, or pride? And is there a way that we can kind of change ourselves from? Because, like, look, when I saw Roots, you know what I'm saying? When I saw Roots
Yeah.
and Mississippi Burning and all that, I'm like, man, we were getting our asses kicked. And it makes you mad, and it's hard to let go. It's just something that plants deep inside your brain for a long time, and it makes you kind of feel like, yo, I'm the permanent underdog in this thing.
Especially
And
if you watch it at Christmas.
well, I know, and well, just quick side note. Twin is saying that because I used to
No,
like love
no.
watching certain.
Let me tell it.
No, no, you have to tell the whole story.
You're not gonna
The
tell it.
whole story is not important.
No, I'm
The
not gonna
point
tell
is,
the whole story. I'm gonna tell it quick. I sent
no, it's
him
cool.
to Blockbuster
Twin.
Video to get a
Now
Christmas
listen,
movie. I said, "Look, go to
it's
the
not
video
even the
store and
point.
get a Christmas movie." He comes back
But
with
that's not the
Mississippi
point.
Burning on Christmas. I said, "Get something
Right.
funny. Get something funny to
But
watch."
the
Anyway,
point is I liked Mississippi Burning. I liked the movie itself, right? But to her point, I like the movie, but it does put you in a different kind of mood, right?
Okay.
So the
yes,
question is,
yes.
when it puts you in a certain kind of mood, I like it cinematically. But the point is, like, how do you watch these things and still deprogram the level of feeling angry and feeling like a victim? Because I wonder, like, my point is, I wonder the new generation, if they were programmed to not feel that level of victimization, would it change how they go about what they want to achieve in life and how they see themselves? You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So,
Well,
um,
I think that again, that's a complex question. There's complex answers with that.
sure.
I think that it's healthy to be angry when you see these things, when you see atrocities, historical atrocities happening. It's very healthy to be angry about it. It's natural to be angry about it. And I think if we're talking about our children, then I think that it's important to again have the conversations with them and help them to understand. Okay, yes, it's okay for you to be angry about these things, to feel victimized, to feel hurt for the people that went through these things. Those things are natural, but we also have to talk with them afterwards and say, yes, these things happened. This is a part of the reason why the United States is the way that it is. This explains why there's wealth gaps, why there's racism, why there's certain things happening. However, now that you have this information and this understanding, use that to your benefit, so that you know how to navigate the society that we live in. Don't use that as an excuse to not achieve your goals and your dreams, or ever
Right.
think that that is going to be an automatic hindrance to you getting to any particular goal. Don't use that as, well, I'm failing because I can never get ahead because, historically this is how things have been, this is how things are always going to be. No, I think that we have to use that information. I mean, and as trite as it may sound, information is power. And we have to empower our children to use that information wisely in a way that's going to help them
Well,
to
that's
succeed.
essentially the question. That's the question that I'm asking, because I think that honestly, I think a lot of adults haven't even worked their way through their own anger to help their children do that said thing. I think a lot of adults haven't even gotten to the point where they can actually uh, deal with it. So some of us actually pass down that anger and
Oh,
resentment,
absolutely.
and you'll hear. So I say that to say that you'll hear like younger black kids be like, yo, that's because white people they did it. You'll hear certain things that I know their parents pass to them, and I'm not mad at it because I get it. We're just human beings. But I want to make one point, but I want to let Zella and Fonda respond to.
I don't. Okay, so the question was, what was the initial question?
Well, I was just kind of saying that do you think that there's a better way, like if we didn't tell kids so much about the victimhood level or how we got our asses kicked, do you think that would help them plan a new trajectory versus that possible feeling of, yo, I feel like a victim in this country, people hate me and XYZ? Do you feel that if you didn't know as much, would you possibly um, look at the world differently and kind of plot a different, you know, trajectory for yourself in the world? You know what I'm saying? Like, and this is speaking of kids now who will be adults later. You know what I mean? So I'm just wondering what you
I
think about
think, I think it would probably be the same. The kids now are different. They're a little bit more blunt than how we were back in the day. But I think that it would kind of be it would be the same. And as far as like for me, I don't like as far as how it has affected, how you were saying how like you were asking how has it affected you any, any kind of way. For me it hasn't, only if I hear something. So like, okay, remember I think the last time when I was on here I told you guys that I had a gig that was it was like on the next day, right? And so that gig, I forgot to mention this too earlier. It was a wedding, right? A really big wedding. And we were backstage because our the people that I sing with, their majority is black, right?
it.
And the wedding, it was full of white people, and we were back. um we weren't back, we call it backstage, but it wasn't really backstage. We was just like in a
Hmm.
back room, and in order to go to the bathroom you had to go through that back room. So even the white folks, they had to go through the room that we were at. So this
Hmm.
one woman, she was really drunk, and she came to the back and she went to use the bathroom, and she made a statement like, oh, so segregation still exists.
Hmm.
And I was like, in my face, it was like, okay, should I say something or should I not say something? Because I'm at work right now, you know? So for me, like, it affects me in a sense of, okay, if I hear something coming out of somebody's mouth, then, okay,
Sure.
I get,
You
I
feel it.
get bitter about, but as far as like, watching the movies and stuff, when I initially seen the movies, I was upset and things like that. But now that I, know what has happened in the past, it doesn't really affect me too much. But when I hear something, someone saying,
Triggering.
yeah, it
It
triggers.
triggers.
Yeah. I don't
Hmm.
like it. I don't like it. Yeah.
No, I understand
And
that. That
kids are
makes
so
sense.
free with their mouths. So,
Yeah.
you might even have white kids saying, you know, nigger and stuff like that. And that's the thing too with us as black people. I don't agree with us using that word,
Hmm.
because we're doing it, and we're doing it in front of other nationalities and things like that, and then they feel comfortable to come out and say it too. And then sometimes I get upset. I will see, like, I don't care if you're Hispanic. I understand Hispanics, they're black too, but I don't
Listen,
care if you're Hispanic and if you're saying nigger and you're Hispanic. I don't like it. You know
you
what I
from
mean?
the Bronx. You
I
from
don't
the Bronx. I know you heard that all growing up.
I don't like it. I don't like it. So I
That's where
feel
they
like
do it
we
the
as
most.
yeah, when I don't know how you guys feel about that. Like when you hear other black people saying, "Oh, nigga, nigga," excuse my language, but saying that,
No,
it, I
that's
just
that's that's a dope one. We're gonna dip into that one, but that's not yet because that's a whole nother thing. But I do like that direction.
no, but
Um,
I
but I feel
only
you.
went there because you said, has it ever affected
Sure.
you? So
No, it makes
I don't
perfect sense.
really, yeah.
That makes perfect sense. What do you think, Zell? Like,
I'm gonna keep it brief. Yeah, I'm gonna keep it brief. So knowledge is power. We do have to educate the kids. I don't think that we should gloss over it. I don't
mhm,
think that not knowing it would help them. I think by knowing it, it would help them understand that racism does still exist today
mhm,
and why understanding what slavery was affects where we are today. Even
sure.
even somebody not even knowing the history of slavery. I met a guy that he said he grew up in Italy. When he moved to America, he said he felt that he was black first and a man second. But in Italy, he's a man first and black
Hmm.
second.
Mm.
Right,
So this
right.
country and this we had this conversation a couple of years ago at a GNC, right?
Hmm.
So even today, the history of slavery and why this country is so rich off the backs of free labor. Like
Yeah,
understanding it, knowledge is power. So
yeah.
I think we definitely need to educate the kids. But these kids nowadays, they don't have the attention span that we had. So if it's
Right.
not in a short, they probably not going to want to watch it. They're like, you got to give it to me
How,
quick.
how do you put 400 years in the short? You better talk fast.
You got to go fast. But yeah, that's just. But again, you can't use it as an excuse. So
Yeah.
I never condone using the atrocities that have happened to our people as an excuse. We still must move forward, push forward, make whatever strides we can in our lifetime to hopefully make it
Hmm.
better for the next generation and the next
Next
generation.
generation.
Because again,
Yeah.
it was an institution for 400 years.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
you don't just flip the switch and be like, oh, it's over. Now everything is as it should be. America is an experiment. They are
Yes.
experimenting
Yes.
with all of
100%.
us, right? And the experiment
100%.
is not done. These other countries
Right.
have been around, they've existed way longer than the United States of America. We're here, we're a part of an experiment. They get it wrong sometimes, they get some
Yeah.
things right. And our hope is that what we do in our lifetime helps to push forward our culture, our race, our people, America as a whole, to make it better than it was
Yeah.
yesterday. But
Yeah.
I'll stop
Well,
there.
I was gonna say something.
no, go ahead. Go ahead, Bonnie.
He said to make what? To make America what?
To make America better.
And make America
You
great
want me to say
again.
make America great again? Is that what you? I can't say great again because for our people it was never great like that. So I can't say
No, I just
make
made a
America
joke
great
out
again. I'll say
She
make it
trying to.
better.
She's trying to lead you into the MAGA
of.
cult.
No,
Oh,
No, I
not.
just.
I'm gonna give
You
her
say make
the Kembe
America great
Mutombo.
again?
Not today.
Not
I
that
was thinking, did Sean know what I'm thinking right now? Did you know what I was about to say? That's why I was
I
laughing.
knew exactly where you were going. That's why I was laughing. I said I know where she's about to go with it. That was kind of slick. Now,
Yeah,
what do
yeah,
y'all?
what you thinking? oh,
Well, do y'all
oh.
think? Okay, so
mm,
this may be not controversial, but this is a thought. What do y'all think? And I don't even know this answer. I'm just throwing it out here. What do y'all think the Jewish people are doing with the Holocaust? That what do you think they do with that Holocaust narrative? Because they do use it in a way um, to never again to focus their ways. And again, I'm not. This isn't about any beef with them. I'm just saying it's about what are they doing with the Holocaust that Black people may not be doing with slavery? Is there something that we can do? Like, do we look at it differently in a sense of like, because when Black people bring up slavery, typically there's an energy of let's just not talk about it or kind of forget about it or whatever. And this is even amongst Black people. People don't like talking about slavery.
And I think that although slavery plays a part in it, it's not only slavery. It's like even after slavery, you look at all the lynchings that occurred, right?
Right.
You got these like so not to because the Holocaust was terrible, but slavery was 400 years.
Right.
400 years.
Right. Right.
So
It was a long, yeah,
yeah, it
way,
was
way long.
much longer than. And although the Holocaust was awful, it was terrible. Adolf Hitler
Yeah.
and those Germans had no right to do that to those people.
Right.
No right.
Right.
No, it was atrocities, like
Hmm.
man's inhumanity to man at its height. Like you don't do that to people. Um, and I think that the Jewish community they rally together.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. So they use it as something to do that. And I know that black people, I know it's very complex because there probably was a time where we used it for that and it changed.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And it got to the point where eventually we have had a lot of toxic things amongst us that
Mm-hmm.
have drawn us apart in different ways for many reasons at different times. But I think that I'm wondering whether we can take that narrative and use it at some point if we're going to deal with slavery and use it as a foundation to teach our kids to understand. Is there a way we can use it for that? And I guess that's the whole idea of the conversation. Because I kind of feel like it's gotten to a point where slavery has gotten so misused and retold and watered down and unfocused that I think it's gotten to a point where even some black people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to deal with it. They
Right.
don't know what to do with it.
Right.
They don't know the purpose of talking about it. And you know, it's unfocused, I feel like. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like other groups they've used their history. What I was saying, Twin, is that I feel like I was comparing, just wasn't comparing, but I brought up the Jewish people in the
Mm-hmm.
Holocaust,
Mm-hmm.
and I was saying that they use that narrative to click together really hard. Zell
Yes.
made a great point because obviously slavery was way longer, you
Right.
know, than the Holocaust. But I feel like at times we did use slavery to tighten up together, and then at some point we've gotten off of that, and now I feel like the whole narrative of slavery has gotten so blown all over the place that even some black people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to deal with it. It's just whatever the case is. So I think that I'm wondering, is there a way in the future where we can start to, if we're going to use slavery or not use it, but if we're going to talk about it amongst us, I'm talking about amongst black people, can we eventually use it to find a way to have some type of narrative of togetherness and a focus? And I know it's difficult, and I understand that, but I think that that's the whole crux of the conversation for me. Is like
Well,
you have some black people that just don't even want to deal with it. They don't even want to talk about it,
you know,
you know,
Trump,
because of that.
I feel like, I mean, obviously the Holocaust was just a horrible atrocity that no human being should ever have to endure. But one of the main differences of many was that the Holocaust was meant to house and kill all these people. That's what they were
Right,
trying to do.
right,
They and then once and then of course they were using them for experiments and different things like that. But in the end, they just wanted to exterminate them all.
Mm-hmm.
With us, the plan was different. You know, like they were trying the ones that they couldn't use, they killed, got rid of those who didn't conform, whatever. But they wanted to keep us around as workhorses for as long as possible. They were using us
right,
to raise their children, to cook their food, to wash their clothes, to do
right,
all these things. And in order to keep us in line, they had to plant all these psychological seeds that ended up sprouting and just rippling and growing on from generation to generation to generation, because they planted these seeds and then we took it and started planting those seeds in descendant after descendant at, you know, generation after generation after generation. And so it's become so difficult to find that togetherness because they planted the seeds of division, you know, and
right,
centuries of division amongst ourselves has been very difficult to overcome because it's almost ingrained in us how we are so divisive with one another
right,
and so competitive and so crabs in a bucket with one another. And so, in order for us to even use slavery as as a coming together kind of a piece, I think that we are going to have to try to overcome some of those psychological seeds that were planted first. You know,
Well, that's go ahead. That I'm glad you said that. That makes me think. I don't mean to cut you off. Please
well,
go
no,
ahead.
I'm just saying. I feel like, well, even if it's not first, but at least at the same time, we're gonna have to try to overcome some of those long, deeply held, ingrained patterns of thinking that have led to our downfall or keeping us stagnant for centuries. And that, I think, is probably one of our greatest problems, is that division and that hatefulness which comes from those seeds planting of hating ourselves. I mean, it goes
Right.
so deep, and the branches branch out to so many different things. You know, from hating your skin color to your hair to your food to your name to all of these things. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's just a lot of work to be done that we have to
Yeah.
start doing before we can really expect even a talk of slavery to be a coming together piece. I mean, you could find a group of people who could talk about slavery and agree and show have some camaraderie, but the deeper issues within the black community still exist. And we've
Right.
got to address those things before we can even expect slavery to be a sticking point or glue
Yeah.
point for us. You know?
Well, do you feel like I think we should always deal with it and talk about it. So I'm not one of
Yeah.
those people because I don't think it's healthy when people be like, oh, especially it's usually sometimes you hear black people say this, but usually it's non-black people to be like, it was a long time ago, get over it. You know, and that's
I feel
that's
like
never healthy. That's
I
that
f-
never it's never a good thing to say get over it. But when I speak about this, I speak about amongst us to say that, you know, is there a way for us to say is well, I won't say is there a way for us to be healed, right? Because there's always things like you said generationally that go on, and there's obviously things that happen through lineage. It just is what it is. Certain things, trauma is even they say is even passed through DNA, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's certain things there, but I guess now I'm like, okay, if we look at our kids and we say, okay, how do we want them to process it? And I think that's what made me think about this topic is how do we want our kids to process it? And I asked myself this question with my kids. My kids are still relatively young. I know Zell, your kids are a little bit older. Obviously, some adults, some still teenagers, but
Mm-hmm.
my kids, twins kids are around the same age, still at that not toddler, but preteen. Shit, not even preteen. They're not even
No.
10 yet. But they've started to learn certain things about MLK, Freedom Riders, at least the 60s civil rights part,
Mm-hmm.
and they
mhm.
know some basic things about slavery, you know. And I started asking myself, how do I want them to process it? I don't have full control how they process it because you know what, Twin, as you said earlier, once you become old enough, they're gonna take in information anyway, regardless to what I think or how I want to plot things out as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to tell them now. I guess the thing in my head, I'm like, you ain't no victim, yo. Don't walk around this world thinking that you're a victim. Yeah, some stuff happened to us,
Mm-hmm.
but you ain't no victim. You're
Right.
not gonna be no victim. You're
Right.
not gonna feel. I don't want you to carry that with you. So I guess
Right.
I'm trying to figure out: is there a way for us to acknowledge what's happened, but we ain't gonna carry that victim. That we ain't victims. We're not gonna carry that in our heart. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? And it's something that I kind of feel that I'm like, I don't want to not teach them, but at the same time, I don't want them to carry, oh, you know what? Well, they did this to us and this is where we at and we always going to be da 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 da. White people always going to, I don't want them to carry that either. So,
Well, that's going
you
to be up
know,
to you to
I
help
think
them
that
process it, appropriately. I mean,
I
ultimately, you know, if they're, I feel like if kids are kind of left to their own devices to process things, then they're going to process it with their little friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And depending upon what, their friends' family, their friends' parents, and what their mentality is, you know what I mean? Then, they could take it either way. They could, get that mentality, because that's what their friend group feels. You know
Right.
what I mean? So
Right.
again, I always go back to, really, it just depends on the family and whatever their generational thought process is. Our parents grew up in Africa, obviously, and so
Right.
their ancestors experienced slavery in a different way. And
Right.
so, our parents didn't come to the United States until the 70s, so they didn't experience the Jim Crow era per se.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Right.
the civil rights movement, and that perspective. But so for mom and dad, they never had a victim mentality. And really, in a nutshell, that what it is, what it comes down to. However your parents, your grandparents think, that's what's going to be passed down. If mom and dad had a victim mentality, whether they grew up here or not, they would have passed that victim mentality down to us, that,
Of
hey,
course.
you're black, and, because black people were slaves, this is why we can't get ahead, and you can't trust them, and this, that, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
So
Right.
we were
Yeah.
lucky enough to not inherit a victim mentality. And mom and dad gave us a, you can do whatever you set your mind to sort of mentality. And so
Right.
we will pass that down to our children, regardless of what they watch or what they see or what their little friends are saying, because that's how we ended up. You know what I mean? We watched all
Well,
this
no,
stuff. You know what I'm saying? So I
I
think
totally
that,
agree with that.
I just think that
But
in general, the conversations that we need to have, I think, is, hey, your own victimology is a mentality, and in order to change your experience, you have to change your thinking. You have to change your belief system. And so, as a people, if we want to come together and we want to use this as something that's going to make us better and make us stronger, then we have to change that mentality from victim to survivor. And when you make that
right.
transition from victim to survivor, your
I like that.
everything changes. We were victims of slavery, but we are now survivors of slavery, especially those of us who didn't directly experience it. We
Right.
are the descendants of survivors of slavery.
Right. Right.
Obviously, the people that died, we couldn't have, I mean, some of us came from them if they had children first, but we are the descendants of the survivors of slavery. And that's a
Right.
powerful statement. They
I like that.
survived it.
That's actually what they say with the Holocaust. You're a
Mhm.
Holocaust survivor.
Survivor.
Um,
Because victims are dead.
and yeah. What you think, Zell?
So like even though like my lineage came from that whole transatlantic slave trade, the bulk of them came from that. Um, we were always taught that this is why it's hard, but it's not an excuse. Get out there, go earn it. Show up to work early. Do what you got to do. You got to work twice as hard to be considered an equal to some people in other races. So it was just
Hmm.
like a rally call to work harder. So no
Hmm.
excuses. Just get out there, go make it happen. That victim mentality will never be passed on to my kids. Like it's about what I tell my kids this. Only you will limit your success. If you don't believe you can, you'll be right. If you believe you
Hmm.
can, you're right. So I
Yep.
want my kids to feel that they can do anything. Get out there, make it happen, see what you like, see what you don't like, because there are certain things it's like in life. You're like, I might want to be this. Well, knowing that you don't like that is as important as knowing what you do like, right? So I
Right.
remember when I was actually in high school, I took a class to be a CNA, and I was like, maybe I want to be in the medical profession. Let me see what this is like. I don't like the sight of blood. I don't like the sight of
Hmm.
blood. I don't like sounds of people
I'll be,
moaning and
I'm sorry,
groaning and hurting. I don't like the smells of hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
Medical profession was not for me.
Not for you.
But I
Right.
found that out early, right? So it's like knowing what
Right.
you don't like is as important as knowing what you do like. Um,
Right.
but never using it like we've never used anything as an excuse because I wasn't taught that. So I wasn't
Yeah.
taught that. I'm not teaching that. And man, my daughter that's 17, she says she wants to be a pediatrician. I want to see
Nice.
her become a pediatrician.
Yeah.
I want to do everything I can to allow that dream to come to pass. And if she
Mm-hmm.
decides to shift gears and do something else with her life, I want her to do that too. But I also want her
Yeah.
to know the power of real estate and owning property because
Yep.
that's one of the ways you can build wealth.
Yep.
Pick up some
Cornerstone.
stocks, teach her ways to build her wealth so that she can have a portfolio,
Mm-hmm.
and not always have to work for money, but make money work for her. Because
Right.
that's how this
Exactly.
country is, right? So let's
That's the
use
way it
what
works.
we learned within this country on how to, navigate building wealth and use that to our
Yeah.
advantage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that I totally agree. I mean, it's one of those things that it's just part of part of the things you ingrain into your kids. Just the same thing. No excuse.
Mm-hmm.
Just go whatever you want. If you want something, go get it. Period. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? And we'll support you, help you to get there as much as possible. But you have, like you said, you have to believe that whatever you want to do is possible. And
Right.
that's the thing of being survivors, knowing what we've gone through in many facets. Because you
Mm-hmm.
have, like I said, you have the slave trade that obviously happened here. We have the slave trade in the Caribbean, all parts of South America. That's why you have Brazil and all parts of South America. They're all Africans mixed with something, either
Mm-hmm.
Spanish or Um, so the experience, and even slavery throughout the world is not new. It's not unique to us black people in America per se, but it is unique in certain aspects. It's unique, but we've had it all throughout history, and I think that no, sorry, I think we've had it all throughout history, but I do think that yeah, it definitely is something that when we stay connected to the history of it, we have to make sure we stay connected from a survival standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's something I think is something that people can gather around at some point. Um, the last thing I wanted to talk about real quick in relation to this, do you guys think reparations is something that is, let me say, do you think reparations is something that is feasible? And do you think it's something that will happen or can
I
happen?
didn't even get a chance to
And if
answer your
so, what
last
do you think it
question.
would look like?
Real quick before we get dip into that, I want to make a point about something that Zell had said, which I
Oh
thought was
yeah, please.
really really interesting and very when you mentioned explain to your children that or you were told that hey show up early work twice you're going to have to work twice as hard to prove yourself. I think that that is such an important statement because our kids need to understand why there's differences, why they have to work twice as hard for something that maybe somebody who doesn't look like them has to work for. And I think it's going to be really important for us to help them to accept that certain things are the way that they are because there comes a certain feeling of dejection and anger when you feel like things are lopsided and unfair. And I think that we do have to help them understand that yeah there are some inequalities in this world. This is where it comes from, but don't let that stand in your way. Although you may have to work extra hard and show up early and do this and do that. Um, don't let that be a hindrance. Don't let that hold you back. Don't let that sit in the forefront of your mind so much that now you're getting angry because that anger is going to distract you from what you need to
Mm-hmm.
do. And so I just wanted to bring that up because I just thought that was so important because I think that so many of our kids they get frustrated, they get angry, they get confused. Well, why do I have to work? Especially if they've really got a whole lot of talent and they've got
Mm-hmm.
a lot more talent or education or intelligence or whatever it is more than their counterpart who doesn't look like them.
Mm-hmm.
Yet they're not getting the same opportunities. They're not getting the same accolades. They're not getting their due because of their skin tone. And I think that as parents, again, it's going to be really important for us to help them understand that and process the unfairness of it. Because heck, some of us, a lot of us, are still unprocessing the unfairness of what we're going through. You
Mm-hmm.
know?
Well, that's a good. That's I'm so glad you
Um,
said that, twin, because that is such a good point because that's another. I mean, I'm glad you said that. So it leads me to say that's part of the process, right? So it's such a difficult thing for I think for Black people um, in this country. I'm talking about. Sometimes it's hard. We have to navigate through when we don't get something that's in relation to our color or
Mm-hmm.
just in relation to that's the way life happens or some other
Or some other
situation or
factor.
you somebody else was chose. So we have to be able to navigate when through something was race related or something was not. And
Mm-hmm.
there's two there's the extreme of both. You could say well it's never a race thing, right?
Right.
And then you can also say everything is race. And I think
Right.
sometimes for us as people, it gets dangerous when if our kids be like, everything that happened to me that didn't go my way was because race. And we all know people like that. And
Oh yeah.
that can be a self-sabotaging
It is
mentality. You can be
very
like, everything that didn't
self-sabotaging.
go your way was because you black. Oh, I'm black. That's why. This person looked at me this way, the cop stopped me, this person, that, everything. But some things are because of race. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that you got to have a healthy objective mentality to say okay, I may not know everything that happens to me in life may or may not be because of race. I won't always be able to decipher what was or what wasn't all the time. Sometimes you don't know.
Hey.
My father's back, what up? So I think you're muted. Oh, okay, she's gone again. Sometimes you know that it's race, sometimes you don't. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's really the duality of um okay, there she go. Oh, there you go.
it was something
Yeah,
that
of course.
I wanted to respond to earlier. When you asked why certain black people they may not want to have a conversation about slavery. I,
Hmm.
from my point of view, I think that a lot of us, I'm not saying all of us, but a lot of us, like we know about slavery, but a lot of black people they may not want to have the conversation because they don't really know like the details as to like what really happened. Even though you had like all these movies and things that came out, they don't really like have read the history as to what happened. Like they weren't really um yes, they were educated on it, but they didn't like really pay attention to it. It was just like, okay, we learned about it and that's it. They didn't really go back and study as to what has really happened. So I think
Hmm.
that it just may be uh just like a defense mechanism. Okay, I don't really want to talk about it. It's because they just don't really have like the knowledge to like really speak on it. You know what I mean? So that's just my opinion on that.
But you know what? That's also a good thing too. I'm glad you said that because I do see that sometimes too, and that's also another reason it made me want to talk about this subject is that you do have people that are. I think we haven't had a clear focus or objective as to how to use the narrative. That you do have black people who want to talk about it all the time and want to use it as the forefront of every part of their current experience now. And then you also have black people who are like, yeah, I don't, I already know, I don't want to talk about it no more. What we going? I'm living in the present now. I don't, you know what I'm saying? I've talked to black people. And I was gonna bring up reparations next. I've talked to black people who are like, I don't want reparations, or I've talked to black people who are like, I don't even think reparations are needed. I've talked to black people who don't even want to, deal with it because there's so much in I wouldn't call it burnout, but they're kind of like what you're saying, LaFonda, where they're kind of like they don't want to talk
Yeah.
about it no more. And I don't think that's healthy
Yeah.
either. You know what I'm saying? But there is a subset of people who are kind of like they don't want to. Like I've seen people that say, "I don't want to see no more slave movies. I don't want to see no more. I ain't watching no more slave movies."
And that's
I you know what
bad.
I'm
It's not
saying?
good.
Like
That's bad,
but for real, tell me you haven't heard that from somebody say, I don't want to see no more slave movies.
Yeah,
I'm done with the
absolutely.
slave
Yeah.
movies. And that underscores like a certain level of I don't want to talk on this subject because they'll we'll go watch another mob
Another
movie,
horror
another
movie.
hood movie, a horror movie. They'll watch other stuff as many times as possible as long as something new come out. But people like I don't want to deal with that subject no more. But I think part of it is that some of what you said, LaFonda, like some of it is they weren't taught the stuff, and even if they were taught, they're like, I don't want to broach this
Yeah.
subject no more. It's painful. It makes me mad. I don't know what to do with it, and I just end up
Yeah, and then
hating
like really go back and
white
study,
people when I watch
what
it.
has happened and things like that. So it's like,
Yeah, so I'm kind of like that's kind of y'all are bringing up so many good points because it's kind of the reason why I'm like, man, this is something that we haven't focused in to use towards something. And LaFon, I think you were off when y'all said this about instead of being a victim, calling it a survivor and using it as something um more
yeah,
cohesive. You know what I'm saying? So I think that it's just an interesting thing because when you have that anger and people not wanting to deal with it and talk about it no more, it's also kind of like the other extreme, because I don't never want to talk about it, but I don't want to talk about it all the time. And when we do talk about it, I want to make sure we're talking about it for a reason to educate, but to also use it as something to say, you know what, this is where we're going next. Because I think that's also part of it is that going forward, where are we going next? If you black and you live in America, honestly, it don't matter if you were well, not saying it doesn't matter, but I'm saying it doesn't matter in the context of whether your lineage goes straight to the South or whether your parents move here, whether you're from Jamaica or whatever. There's all types of culturally, there's some differences amongst black people, obviously, in the country, cultural differences, but re- our experience in America is typically the same, especially once you have children. As I've had children, they don't know anything about Ghana. They're just not, you know, they know America. They don't know Ghana. So they're not going to relate to Ghana. And I was born here and for the most part I grew up here. I'm Ghanaian, but I don't relate to Ghanaian culture the way I relate to American culture. And that, I can say that honestly because that goes for many people. People who you maybe your parents are from Trinidad or Jamaica or wherever. Once you start coming here, American culture washes all of that stuff away. And you become American and then all of a sudden we all tend to gravitate towards the African American
right,
experience. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And
Well, the
unless
point
you
of
grew
even
up out
coming
in the
here too
country,
is to
you're
kind
African.
of, yeah,
Sorry,
it's
go ahead,
okay.
twin.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Hmm.
I was just saying that kind of the point of coming here is to, integrate, to learn, become Americanized, so to speak. So
Right.
that you can prosper in this society. Because
Yeah.
if you don't become Americanized to a certain degree, you're it's going to be very difficult for you to get ahead. You know,
Yeah.
I
But
mean,
you know
that's why
what?
mom and dad came here.
You do have you listen. You do have many people from all different walks of life who come to America and don't necessarily use the racism narrative positive one way or another. You know what
Hmm.
I'm saying? So I think that I guess that's the whole thing I'm thinking about is that, I guess obviously we ain't gonna come up with an answer per se. There's no magic bullet answer, but
Right.
I do think that it is a question that I ask myself, and hopefully we got some type of we move the needle forward somehow. I don't know, but
I think we've gotten. I'm sorry.
oh man, what you think, Zell?
So here's what's interesting for me, right? So um, we have a family reunion that I'm a part of. It's the Guy
Mm-hmm.
family reunion, GUY. So
Mm-hmm.
I was familiar with some of my relatives that had the last name Guy, but one of my relatives did a deep dive. And so I was able to find my great great grandfather fought in the Civil War. And
Wow.
it's like, yo, that's dope. So
That is dope.
my three times great grandmother, she was a slave. She had two sons. Both of her sons, my great great grandfather, or yeah, great great grandfather and great great grand uncle, both fought in the Civil War. Baldy
Wow.
Guy was my great great grandfather, and George Guy was my great great grandfather. And they were actually a part, they were shown in a Will Smith movie about, I think it was a 14th Amendment he has
Okay.
on Netflix. And he shows a
Okay.
picture of two black men in their Civil War, Union Army garbs with their arms around each other's shoulders. And I'm like, yo, that's my great great granddaddy.
That's
Outstanding.
crazy.
Right? So just using that as a line coming from there to here, knowing the gap that we have coming from slavery, having nothing. Like, you got nothing but the clothes on your back. You free to
Right.
starve. Go ahead. You
Right.
free. Figure it out.
Right.
Right. So I
Right.
think reparations would be a great conversation to have so that we could try to kind of even the playing field just a little bit. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
always about money. It's about
Right.
education. I worked in banking for a number of years, and I found out that people just don't know their financial IQ, not only of African Americans, but other people as well. Sometimes is much lower than it needs to be in order for
Right.
you to move the needle forward for your family. Just for your
Right.
family. Forget about your whole race. Just for your
Mm-hmm.
family. Like, how do you move
Mm-hmm.
that needle forward? It's about that financial education. So you can
Education.
get people like somebody who wins lottery, right? You can have somebody win the lottery and they end up broke. And you're like, how you
Yep.
broke? Or people that go to the NFL or NBA or MLB or, the National Hockey League. Like, you have people, if you don't come from money and you don't understand money and you don't understand finances and your financial education is not, you don't have it, right? You just don't even have a financial education. It comes in one hand and goes out the other, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, why am I broke? Well, what did you do with your money? Did you invest any of this money? How much did you invest? How
Right.
much did you save? What debt did you pay off? How much debt
Right.
did you create with this? Because you're like, I make more money, now I can spend more money. And
Right.
also that, that whole issue of having survivor's remorse. So if you have money, you're like, I want to save everybody. You
Right.
can't save everybody. You can't
No.
you can't put everybody on a payroll. You can't pay
Nope.
everybody's mortgage. You can't pay everybody's rent, everybody's car note. So, and
Yeah.
again, it's about having that financial education. So
Right.
reparation is more than just money. Like,
Mm-hmm.
let me be able to send my kids and my kids' to school at a discount or for free,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Let me be able to sit down and we need some financial education. They don't even teach financial education in school.
They
You in
don't.
school, you
No.
go to school all these years, and they don't teach it,
Mm.
right? So since you
Right.
don't, and it's not even the fault, like, because if your parents don't know, they can't teach you, right?
Of
Right.
course
So
not.
then you have
Yeah.
to find a mentor, someone outside of your family, to teach
Right.
you something that sometimes you don't even know the questions to ask. So
Right.
how can you
Right.
get a great understanding of what you need to know about finances if you don't even know what to ask? You don't
If you don't know.
understand credit. What is a credit score? How is a credit score derived? Like, you don't know any of those things. How do I buy my first house? Should I buy a house? Should I rent? Like, there's a lot of things that if you don't know, what are stocks? How do I invest in stocks? Like, if you
Right.
don't know, you don't know, and you
Mm-hmm.
need to. Education is
Is
just that part, right? Just
is part
knowing
of it.
is so important. And I think that needs to be, a component. Even if
That's
you,
a big
before you even
component
talk
of it.
about reparations, let's talk about this financial education. Let's talk about how to get these things
Well,
in your mind so you can understand what would I be able to do with, money if I did get some money. Because it's not always about money.
Zell,
Tax breaks as
assume
well.
that right
I
there. I
totally
wanted to
agree with
cut it
him on
right there
that.
because that's
Totally,
a good point.
100%.
Now, if now let's assume, because like you said, a reparations package would never include what you're saying, but I do think that part would be should be a, and I think it is a big part of into the black sphere of knowledge and financial literacy. That's been huge. I think I've seen a lot of it within all those financial circles, the Earn Your
Hmm.
Leisures, and all those other podcasts and all those other all the whole sphere of media. I think black financial literacy has grown tremendously over the last 20, 30 years
Yeah.
for sure. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I totally agree. In a reparations package, I think that's a great point. That things like it doesn't have to just be monetary; it has to be it could be things like discounts to do certain things, which
Mm-hmm.
I think is a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of the last question I had as far as reparations. Do y'all think it's something that is? I think it's feasible. I think most reasonable people say it's feasible. I have met some people that said America doesn't have the money for it. I have heard that.
You got the money.
They got the money.
But but again, here's the but the funny thing is black people now keep in mind going back to earlier in the pod, I played that video where they were talking about how it needs to be narrowed into people who like for all intents and purposes, myself, my sister, we don't fit into the category of reparations, right? So, but if your parents have direct lineage, you gotta come up with something because if you can't include everybody, oh well, the slaves they came from West Africa, so that includes me too. You can't fit everybody into the thing. You
Right.
got to say, okay, we got to have some criteria. Otherwise, everybody who got some level of I was gonna make a Kamala Harris joke, but never mind. But anyway, I'm sorry. So you can't put everybody in there. So if they were to come up with a reasonable criteria. And then there's some people who can't trace a lot of people who can't trace their lineage. But let's just say the people who could. We get a narrow group, and you start to say, okay, my original point was that in America, I think black people are maybe I think 40 something million, 40 million black people in the country, if I'm not mistaken. There's like 230 or 320,000 Americans. Black people are like 12, 13, 14%, something
Mm-hmm.
like that. So I think
Mm-hmm.
there's 40, somewhere around 45 million black people. Of that, includes people who may not be fitting in that thing. Let's just say 30 million fit in there, right? Let's just say for a conversation. So if we take the sliver of the black people in there, for the people who say it's not feasible and it's not the money isn't there, then you say look at the migrants that's coming and they put money into the migrants that are probably 15 20 million. So I say all that whole thing to say that of course, it's possible. And just back to Zell's point, it's not just money; it's also things, um, benefits, and things that they could do that would be helpful to the descendants of slaves. You know what I'm
I
saying?
think that
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely feel like it would be helpful, but helpful if only if it were used appropriately. And that is a problem, a systemic problem that we face in the African American community with mishandling of money. And I think we have to blame urban pop culture for that too, with regard to seeing money as a means for material wealth, or looking at wealth as having material things. And, that's where you get that hood mentality of, okay, well, you got the Benz, but you pulling up, in the projects with it, or you got a fancy car, but you don't have a garage to park it
Right.
in,
Mm-hmm.
and all those things. So I think that without the financial education, um, it could end up being a situation where in the long term it doesn't benefit them, because the money wouldn't be the money is finite, right? You only would get so much money, and when it's gone, it's
Right.
gone. And
Right.
so
Mm-hmm.
we have to ask ourselves, okay, once you've received this money, if you don't do the right thing with it, what have you really gained? You know what I mean?
Right.
And to me, it's a far more sad scenario to think that you got this money, you got this opportunity on the backs of your ancestors and everything that they went through, and it's all been pissed away. You know?
Well, they made a. I'm laughing because they made a joke about that when they, remember barbershop, the first barbershop.
Hmm.
It was like I think it was Cedric. He made a joke. People get reparations. Ain't gonna do nothing but make the Cadillac dealership the number one Cadillac's the number one cars
For
in the country.
real.
But you know what? I think that that's a great point. I think that a lot of people have talked about the fact that it can't just be money because
Hmm.
not all of us, but a lot of us are not used to generational wealth. And
No.
we Americans, we like to spend. So it's going to be a lot of TVs, it's going to be a lot of clothes and cars and things. But I
And
do think
we
that being said,
in
I'll
all
just say that
countries, though.
one of the things that I do think is valuable is land. And I do think I think land is a great thing to possibly give. Um not to mention the education of it, but I think land some things that are tangible
Hmm.
But see,
would be a big
and then
deal.
that's the thing. That is where I feel like reparations wouldn't happen. Is
You said
because
would not happen.
if you're talking about giving people land and other tangible things, you we're already up against a system that wants to keep black people in their place. Okay, you're already up against a system to where okay they don't want you to be able to afford homes in certain parts of certain neighborhoods because they want to keep that looking a certain way, right? You're already dealing with systems that want to ensure that African Americans are not getting the educational opportunities that some of their counterparts are getting, right? You're already dealing with a system to where right now as it speaks, there are areas of the South that are dealing with environmental racism. So to think, or you're dealing with places that are trying to take back land that was owned by slavery, but you had other non-blacks encroaching upon that land and slowly trying to move in because there's no record. You know, the records are old, and now
Right.
they're trying to take that land for their own benefit. That's happened over decades and centuries.
Yeah.
So I think, at least with respect to land, that's where I feel like there would be a whole lot of pushback. I think it would be a whole lot easier if I'm thinking from the perspective of a non-black person. It would be a lot. I could see them giving money away a whole lot faster because they already feel like black people are irresponsible with money. Oh,
Mhm.
we'll give it to them, and they'll just spend it all on Air Jordans
They're gonna
and
give it right back to us.
they're gonna give it right back to
Reparation sales.
reparations.
Mhm. Yeah.
Absolutely, Zell. Absolutely, there will be reparation sales. Come and spend your newfound wealth on these brand new discount Jordans.
Hmm.
Come and get this. Oh, I'm gonna go ahead and get that new Nissan, or I'm gonna go ahead and get that Benz.
Mhm.
You know, you'll sales of clothes and cars and shoes will be through the roof,
Hmm.
and that money will be gone. You know,
So
you will have a significant number of people who will spend it wisely, or save it, or put it in the bank, or do something with it. But the more money that they give you, they will also tempt you and encourage you to spend that money to stimulate the economy.
Economy.
That's
Absolutely.
what you should do if you want to make your society better. You want to make your race better. You should stimulate your economy.
Hmm.
They'll give you low interest rates, maybe on
Hmm.
certain houses in certain areas, so they can continue their agenda of keeping certain people in certain areas.
you're saying that, and no, I tend to agree with you. I do think land would be a harder sell.
Hmm.
than than money. That's a good point. I do think if they were to introduce, and the reparations talk used to be a very far off talk when it comes to government, but recently there have been reparation. I don't know if bills have been introduced, but I do know ideas of bills have been put together and brought forth. There's different politicians, like I think Cory Booker. He was the ex president, not president. Excuse me, the ex mayor of Newark. I think he was involved in helping to put together a bill or trying to propose a bill. So it's the conversation has gotten more and more pushed forward to the front. I think it's such a hard thing to tackle that it hasn't really gotten to the point, obviously, where it needs to go. But I agree. That's a good point, Twin. I don't land would probably be, to my opinion, probably the best thing because that's what ex-slaves were
But you
supposed to
also have to
get
ask
anyway.
yourself: is there even enough land to give everybody?
Well, that's I don't know, but I do know
I
there's a
don't think
lot of
there's
land.
enough. I think there's
There's
a
a
lot
lot
of
of land
land,
out there. It ain't
but
all
there's
built
also a
on,
lot of people. And depending on how much
huh?
land you're trying to give
My
people, I
my
don't know.
grandmother, she passed away, and she had land in West Virginia, but ain't nobody in his family doing nothing with it.
Mm.
Well,
Ain't nobody doing nothing with it.
it might be up for reparations then when it's time, because maybe y'all ain't doing nothing with
Mhm. I'm
it.
saying, I mean, there's a
No,
lot, there's a lot
but
of land, but there's
there's
also a lot of people. Is there enough land to give?
well
And then you
they
also have is it who is it that's trying to buy a lot of land in the United States?
a particular person.
Say it again.
Are you talking about a particular person or a group?
Yes, there's somebody that's trying to buy like the majority of the land in the United States.
Who,
Is it
Trump?
someone black? Or,
A
Ted
white.
Turner. I know Ted Turner
okay,
owns a lot of land in the United States of America.
he
No,
Ted
definitely
Turner,
owns a lot.
who owns TNT and TBS and all of these other
Yeah.
networks.
somebody, I forgot who it was, but they're trying to like buy a lot of land, like try to take up all the land, like that's their plan. And it's like
Yeah.
out there.
There's still a lot of land. Now the question is for the people, if they were to come up with the group who would be eligible for reparations,
Mm.
is there land for all those people? That I don't know. But I do know that there is some land. Maybe everybody ain't gonna get 40 acres and a mule per se, but
I don't even
that's
want the
probably not
mule. Keep
realistic.
that donkey. Shoot. What you gonna do with
But
that donkey now?
land should be, what do you say?
I said, what you gonna do with what you gonna do with a mule now? You keep that
Well,
donkey.
they
You
keep the
might
mule, but you
you,
give me the
you
land.
might want a Mustang. Get
Right,
a,
right.
get a Mustang, a Ford Mustang.
Get 40 acres in a Mustang.
But check this out. If I could, in Evanston, Illinois, they have a reparations package that they're giving to people that were discriminated against. I think you had to live in that area in a certain window of time when they were doing a lot of red line and not lending money to black people in the community. And one of the pieces is to give them money towards a down payment for buying property in that area.
In Evanston.
Yeah,
Okay.
in Evanston. So, but you have to be in Evanston. So if you want to buy a house, if it's not your first house, it could be an investment property. So they'll
Okay.
give you money towards a down payment to buy property. So I think that could be a component. So not
I
just
think if
giving
they
you
put
land, but
enough.
because everybody's not going to want to buy a house. So if you don't want to buy a
Facts.
house, then maybe that's not something that you'll receive because you're like, I don't want to buy a house. But maybe you'll get other components of it.
Well, if they put enough, I think if they put enough thought behind it, it's definitely feasible to put enough thought behind it and come up with ways to repair with reparations and
Hmm.
come up with some certain things. Maybe it's not a universal package that everybody gets the same exact thing, but they should
Right.
maybe come up with something.
Hmm.
But I think honestly, and I don't know, I think the biggest resistance to reparations are two things. One, y'all tell me if you think I'm wrong. The two biggest resistance to reparations from the government standpoint are one, they're not really sure who they're going to give it to. So they haven't figured out that criteria. I think that's the first thing. And then the second thing is they don't know how the greater white society is going to react.
Oh, they're going to hate it.
Mm,
Well, they're obviously gonna hate it, but
They're going to hate it.
they're resistant because of what that reaction may look like.
Hmm.
That's what I.
Of course.
Well, I
What I'm
think
going to do is there's a link that I'm going to put in our chat where
Okay.
it's some at a college level they looked at what reparations would look like and what you can do. More importantly, they were looking at the wealth gap and what items should be included in order to bring that gap closer. And I was like,
Okay.
it's very thought provoking. You might not agree with all the ideas in there, but I think it was something that was well thought out. And it was it was put together real well. And that's something that could be looked upon as a
Okay.
means to look at as a baseline on how to get, work towards reparations. Even Bob Johnson, he put a figure on it. Bob Johnson, the former owner of BET, he put a number on what reparations should look like for
He
Black
did.
Americans. Yeah,
Okay. He put actual like monetary number
he
on it.
did.
Okay.
He did. I'll send you
Yeah,
the link.
definitely put that link in the chat.
I also think that you're going to have not just the greater white society hate it. I think you're going to have other races that are going to be opposed to it. Other races that were, marginalized, discriminated against, who feel like, they're due something as well. You'll have people who have a drop of black blood in them and feel like, hey,
Well,
where's mine?
Right.
My ancestors were slaves too. That
yeah.
I need to get something. So I think that we're going to encounter resistance not just from the greater white society, but from anybody that would not be eligible.
That's a great point. Now I'll say two things to that. The other groups that were marginalized, they actually some of them have gotten reparations, like the Native Americans have got reparations. I'm not arguing whether their reparations were fair
Hmm.
because obviously I don't know, but I know that some people that say they it kind of has not been fair to them, but they did get some form of reparations.
Mm-hmm.
The Japanese got a form of reparations for
Mm-hmm.
the camps in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
So um, the only group they haven't really touched on is African Americans.
Right.
Um, and to your point, that's what I was saying. That coming up with that criteria is probably mind-boggling to people who try to figure it out because that is a great
Yeah.
point, Twin. I mean, if you're mixed, um,
Right.
if you're mixed, then what do you do? If you're a quarter black, what do you do? I
Right.
mean, we have the one drop rule in the country, so it is so many things that come into play. You have Kamala Harris, who um,
If you're black, you're black.
well, that's nice to hear, but you know what? It gets crazy because that's I'm not saying that you're not. I'm saying I'm not qualifying who's black because that's a complicated thing in America. If you have some black in you, you black. That's the way we've been rolling for a
Exactly.
long time. But when they start talking about that reparation package, then they got to start defining stuff. If you want eighth black, they might be like, "Yo, you only one eighth.
Right.
Are you
We'll
getting
give
this
you one
full
eighth of the
It's
package?"
reparations.
it's
Right.
You
funny how
know?
that happens, and then when like somebody gets killed and they half, half whatever Hispanic or half white, they're like, oh, this person's black, so it's weird. But
Yeah.
to answer your question earlier, is Bill Gates about the land?
Hmm.
It's Bill Gates.
Oh, Bill
Yeah,
Gates.
Bill
Yeah.
Gates. Okay.
yeah,
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's super. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, land is something tangible that is always valuable in some form or fashion. I mean, they understood that since the beginning of time. But as far as America's foundation, I mean, those were some of the those were the most money is really nothing. Money's just an idea, but land in and of itself has always been valuable. You can
Hmm.
live on it, plant on it. It's earth, and I do think that would be the biggest resistance as far as reparations would definitely be land because
I think
land
so.
is truly valuable and it's true wealth because you can do
Mm-hmm.
something with it.
Mm-hmm.
Even if people didn't want to do nothing with it, they can always sell it
Yep.
or it's sit in their family for a couple generations and then sell it. So that's one of the reasons why they didn't give black people land after slavery because that would have been one of the true wealth builders for the land that black
Exactly.
people, black Americans who come from the lineage of slavery in this country. the amount of land they should own is obviously far less than what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So the reparations situation, I think they're gonna have to have people who actually have the balls and the patience to really make the criteria.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody ain't gonna be happy about it, but the other thing I would throw out there, and this isn't an original idea, but it may not be. Maybe it's not something for individuals, but it may be something for greater Black American society. Um,
Mm-hmm.
no one's going to be happy because if you go that route, then you still will have people that like, well, everybody's benefiting from it. You have African immigrants, Caribbean immigrants, immigrants from here, immigrants from there who are black who are going to come and benefit on something that they
Mm-hmm.
they didn't live through. So you're going to
Right.
have that issue regardless. But I do think they have to come up with something at some point, or we'll just be talking about it for the next 100 years.
Or they'll just hand out another stimulus package. Everybody will get another stimulus, and that will be the reparations. People make jokes about that, like that was Trump's way of giving black people
That was
reparations
that was like
and
that was that
stimulus.
pre reparations.
Mm-hmm. And
Those were
and
those
and and,
PPP
and,
Oh,
and,
loans.
and
PPP, yeah, PPP
right.
loans.
Now they
Exactly.
now they coming
Exactly.
back 3 4 years later. There's people still getting locked up for them. People like, damn, I forgot I even took out a PPP loan. They they ain't forget about those loans. They coming back later. Like, yo, remember 2020?
Right.
Oh, damn, I
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
2020 was a lifetime ago to some people who were scamming.
Exactly.
They spent
Exactly.
that money a long time ago.
Oh my God, forget about it. But people went crazy with it. People went crazy with it. Like people went crazy with it. People was like they had three businesses. I got three cell phone stores and two sneaker shops, and I need I need a loan for all five businesses. You can't be scamming out hundreds of thousands of dollars and thinking you're gonna get away with it. They let you rock for a minute because all the confusion, but they be
Well,
like,
yeah,
okay, no problem.
but all these big businesses end up getting forgiven,
Oh, of course,
Hmm.
while
that's
the
the
little
game.
guys were just, I don't know.
That's the game. So, but nonetheless, this has been dope. I'm not gonna keep y'all all night. Um, I think we scratched the surface well, and like I said, I always love everybody's perspective because if you live in an echo chamber of people who just agree with you, you can't never learn nothing, in my opinion. You know what I
That's
mean?
right.
So,
That's
I
right.
love all that. Um, so let's go ahead, let's get out here, let's vote Trump and get this thing going, and we'll be good.
I'm
Let's get
with
this
you,
thing
Shy.
going.
Look,
Either him or
if
Do
no.
you
this.
want to be on your podcast, there has to be a no campaigning rule.
All right, you're right. You're right. I know.
No
This is very
campaigning.
biased. Okay, vote for the candidates that you love.